Well, hello and welcome everyone to this third edition of the second season of the Cricket Web podcast. We're still doing them. We're still doing them, and
Yay.
everything's all right. Um, it's seasonal rot, I guess. It's slowly going to drop down in volume until eventually it's like an icicle.
We should make these 3 hours long and do them like a movie instead of a TV series.
You're right. Yeah.
A movie every season.
We've already, and it'll eventually be like The Office or The Vicar of Dibley, or one of those British sitcoms that has almost no episodes, and then they get sort of stretched out further and further with big 90-minute specials, and then we only do them at Christmas.
Sounds good.
Anyway, there are other people here. My name is Jake, better known on the forums as How's That. With me is Nitesh, better known as Zorix, who you've heard already. You're supposed to say hi at that point.
Hi. Sorry, I'm opening up a packet of biscuits.
We're a pro outfit. And a special guest also with us, hopefully for not the last time, is Hanne, better known as Margaret Garlic.
Hello. Yeah, I'm the forum's resident European /woman /whatever.
Yeah, we don't.
So
yeah, I don't think we have anybody on the podcast who's in a regular cricketing area.
Have you ever had anyone who's a moderator?
Yes. Yeah, because Hannah's been on before.
Oh, my bad.
And Spark's been on.
Yeah,
I think.
Spark did the first 2 episodes, I think.
Yeah. And I think, aren't you in a regular cricketing area? How? Or...
I mean, technically, I'm in Birmingham, which does have an international cricket ground in it. So I'll go with that. But
Hong Kong is a regular cricketing area too. We have an international ground as well, okay?
But at the same time, it's nowhere in England feels like cricket is anything other than a niche anorak weirdo club. Like, you know, I've talked about this before. It's not really a big deal. Then again, by that standards, maybe it isn't anywhere apart from India,
Pakistan, and maybe UAE among the workers there.
Yeah.
Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, basically that whole subcontinent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots have happened since we last did a podcast because we're reducing it to TV specials. The last time we came on and chatted, we were in the middle of previewing the England against Pakistan Test series. I thought that Pakistan would win the first test and then wouldn't be good enough to win another one, just because England would get their act together and not bat badly. That was more or less what happened, except England also managed to win the first test and the others were ruined by rain. I think I'm going to claim my prediction is okay.
Yeah, Pakistan could have won.
Then
sort of fall apart there towards the end.
They were certainly in the position to win the first. Did either of you guys manage to watch that impressive partnership between Butler and Wokes?
Yep. Saw it. Really good. They batted really well. Probably Pakistan missed a few tricks in the field in that test. There's some debate about Azhar Ali not using Shadab Khan as much as he should have. Maybe relying a bit too much on the quick balls, bowling with no real direction or plan. But Wokes and Butler were flawless. Barely made a bad stroke throughout the whole partnership. So,
and
England won that.
It is often the case, isn't it, that people focus on these captaincy decisions, especially when they go wrong. Much more often when they go wrong than when they go well. Ultimately, he's got a bunch of quick bowlers who reduced England to something like 12 for 3 in the first innings. If they're fresh and they're ready to go, you're probably going to rely on them as well. Shadab is a good bowler by all means, but he's also the 5th bowler in that team. So you can just imagine if he had bowled a lot of Shadab Khan and that hadn't worked, then a bunch of commentators would have just as easily gone, well, why on earth didn't he use Shaheen Shan Afridi, who bowled so well in the first innings, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And that's just the nature of the commentator, as you say. But I do wonder whether Pakistan would have had a decent chance in the second test if it was on, because Rizwan had dragged them to a decent total. And,
It's true. Rizwan was a bit of a find. I do think, though, that after that initial sort of shock and awe, and we saw a similar thing with the West Indies, where their pace attack was very effective in the first test and slowly got less effective as time went on, which was partly due to tiredness and partly due to, I think, England just sort of getting used to them and them not actually being that consistent. And in Pakistan's case, I think we saw an exaggerated version of that, where they were very good immediately from the off. Mohammad Abbas was always threatening with the new ball and then not so much later on, which is probably very predictable for him. And then pretty much immediately after that first innings, it just sort of fell apart for them. Nazim Shah, who bowled these amazing single deliveries, especially to get rid of Joe Root, who had a disappointing summer. But the rest of the time he was kind of nowhere. Shaheen Shanafridi had a big no ball problem. He was kind of all over the place, and that's because these guys are 17 and 20 officially.
Officially.
So it's kind of, it was. I think there was a lot of hype about this pace attack that was then sort of accelerated by that first evening where they knocked England's top order over. But then there was nothing else after that had any measure of consistency, and they probably came in with a bit more hype than they really deserved. Is that unfair?
Yeah. No, that's usually the case with Pakistan pace attacks, but the problem is now that after this series, they might drop one or two of them for much worse players, and then they're back on the cycle again. So
you say much worse players. I think they probably could have done with somebody who was a bit more experienced and could also hold a bat in that pace attack.
Yeah.
They had 3 number 11s. Like I said, they've got 2 very young players of indeterminate age. So maybe having one of those 2 guys, Nazim Shah and Shaheen Shanafridi in the team, just leads them towards a better balance, both in terms of the lower order, which I think they needed a bit of, and and just having an experienced bowler who you can go to and know won't make such a mess of things. And that's presumably why Sahel was in the squad.
I don't think skill-wise that Naseem and Shaheen are literally in the best 3 fast bowlers Pakistan can field. Probably the best prospects they have in terms of actual skills in delivering on the field. They did have someone like Sohail Khan. They have had other fast bowlers in the past who've come and gone through a system. I think Wahab Riaz was recalled as well, or was that only for white ball?
He was recalled for the test squad. I don't think anyone expected him to team. But Wahab Riaz has always done pretty well against England, so it would have made a bit of sense.
Again, if you're comparing Naseem and Shaheen have the raw talent, sure, but they've not played at that level. And what we know about Wahab Riaz is that even if he goes missing for most of a match, he does always give you that one great spell. Has a way of taking wickets, has a way of bowling to a plan and just being fast and short and holding up. And he has something he can deliver. He's a proven performer at that level to some extent. Whereas Naseem and Shaheen are both young quicks, and to have young quicks be the backbone of your attack, you need some experience. It's not all about skill and potential. And
and
test, they both were definitely pairing.
And you say, going and dropping one of those guys would probably be unfair, and I think it probably would be. But at the same time, you don't have to be playing when you're a teenager. You can come back when there's when it makes a bit more sense for you to debut. There will be another opportunity.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, although I think I'm not sure how the situation will be in Pakistan this winter, and we'll probably come to that. But hopefully they can get some cricket in a reasonable environment, because as I understand it, even their president is now Imran Khan, the actual Imran Khan. So he's revolutionized their first-class system as well, and thinks that's really important for a president to do. So
I mean, it's necessary to specify the actual Imran Khan because there's a bunch of others. Imagine
the
being
page on Wikipedia has 20 of them.
Yeah, imagine being a Pakistani cricketer called Imran Khan. It'd be like having to introduce yourself. I'm Imran Khan.
There are Pakistani cricketers called Imran Khan. Their cricket info page will say Imran Khan bracket 2 or Imran Khan bracket 3. Imran Khan bracket 4.
Exactly.
Imagine introducing yourself as Imran Khan the cricketer. Right. Oh, okay.
Yes, and which one?
We also have this problem in schools in Birmingham. All right. You can laugh, but in a recent class, there were two Muhammad Khans, and the only thing that we had to tell them apart, because they were in the same class as well, so the only thing we had to tell them apart on our data and everything was their individual student numbers that they get assigned when they apply. So it was pretty much our equivalent of the Crick Info system with a bracket afterwards. Anyway,
It is no problem.
Following that, rain pretty much ruined the series, but there were a couple of highlights. Mohammad Rizwan is a real find for Pakistan. I think
I wasn't impressed by him in the first match, but he showed some grit afterwards.
Yeah, well, he was a very kind of. I understand that he came into the side because he was in good form with the bat. He got 100 in their warm-up game, but to me, at least, he gave the impression of a pretty old-fashioned number 7 keeper batsman. He was very hard to dislodge. He was pretty. He got really good value from his shots, being able to stick in there and eventually picking his time and getting it going. And then with the gloves, he was by far the best wicketkeeper in the summer.
Yeah.
I think Atif Nawaz, who is one of the Test Match Special commentators now, another person who actually started his commentary career on the sofa 10 years ago, but I digress. Atif Nawaz was talking about statistically, if you try and use things like commentary data from Cricinfo and CricViz and other places like that, and try and look at how often the ball is just simply taken, or how often the chances are taken over a certain amount of period of time, of all the regular keepers in Test match cricket now, Mohammad Rizwan is actually right at the top. So
really?
Yeah, just in case, not necessarily in terms of literal wicket chances, but also counting things like taking the ball cleanly, not allowing it past you for runouts, things like that. Mohammad Rizwan comes out right at the top. I don't know how, rigorously the data was collected or anything, and
could be influenced by it's a decently pure pitch as well, so easier to see and less.
He plays in UAE a lot.
CHR is a bit hard to predict, I guess.
This is true, but foreign wicketkeepers have gone to the UAE and made an absolute hash of it with the lack of bounce. So being able to play there and also go to England, go to Australia, go to South Africa.
Has he played there much in UAE?
Yeah.
Yes, he had 9 tests. So
okay, so he hasn't played all over the world yet. Fair point.
No, he's never played in the UAE, in fact. So
obviously the bright spot of the series for England is Zach Crawley, who was left out as possibly the weakest batsman in the side when Ben Stokes was trying to play as a pure batsman, and then made more runs than everyone else put together in the third test.
A lot of wanker runs.
You reckon?
Yeah, definitely.
What I thought, I would say he got 267, right? So I would say only 17 of those were wanker runs. I would say that's the cutoff.
I think around the point when he crosses 150 and when Butler was at the other end. It's Butler, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
At that point, Pakistan had thrown the towel in.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, but at the same time, he'd already got to 150, and that's not exactly
150 is pretty good.
Yeah.
He's good.
Kind of after that point, funnily enough, on the second day of that test match, during the sort of latter half of that partnership, Crawley was actually the aggressor. Butler was just sort of thinking it around and giving him the strike a couple of times and over.
Crawley was bored. And he's like, this is too easy. He was playing reverse sweeps against Asad Shafiq and stuff like that.
Okay.
It's just ludicrous. It was a good innings. He batted well. He's a good find. The tall batsman. Not many great tall batsmen.
He did score aggressively, and I think there's also been this narrative, and I don't know if I've already complained about this, probably have, of Crawley was, when Crawley was picked to play for England, he had a first-class average of 30, and it wasn't much better when he played this innings. And so you get a lot of people who seem to have an agenda against reading is the only kind of way that I can put it, who say things like, you just have to look at someone and know how good they are. You don't have to look at statistics, quote unquote. But really what they meant is you don't have to look at their single career average and then call it a day, which I don't think anybody actually does. Zach Crawley hadn't had a really good time in county cricket. He hadn't piled on the runs, but he did have a much better second season than the first season. And then on top of that, and that's when he was picked. And then on top of that, since he has been picked, he's actually done very well for England Lions in Australia. He did very, very well for England in a warm-up in Sri Lanka just before the Test series there was cancelled in March. So, the runs are there. It's just come in a kind of slightly weird order. And so you can go on records. You just have to pay at least a little bit of attention. So this sort of crotchety, eyes not spreadsheets kind of thing. Sorry, Mark. You're kind of missing the wood for the trees there.
Yeah, these days it's harder to do that kind of analysis as well because Cricket Archive has gone through a paywall, so you have to. I guess you can do Cricket HQ now, but the interface is kind of hard.
Well, Cricket HQ is garbage.
Yeah. Well, the data is okay, but the interface is garbage. So.
Yeah, and I like Cricket Archive. I just forked up cash for it. I was doing a little bit of archival work on Hong Kong cricket, so I figured you don't get those scorecards anywhere else. But yeah, it's hard to do analysis. I don't think many people have patience for real statistical work nowadays, anyways.
Too much at work already.
I think people just don't trust stats.
Yeah, could be that as well.
But
that they don't give it, that it seems to be pointless to, and you can make it. Oh, I just spilled coffee. Be right back.
Do something. Careful there.
A bunch of pros. I wonder if 2020 cricket, especially, but also to a lesser extent ODI cricket, has kind of made people slightly more distrustful of stats, because there are, as I've suggested, there are a lot of stats that are pretty poor, mostly career averages, but also averages in a particular format or averages over a certain small period of time. I think are very misleading, but probably the most leading statistics are 2020 averages and economy rates. Because they depend almost exclusively on when you're batting and when you're bowling, more than how you did it. And because they're such small, not small sample sizes, because they're often over a large number of games, but because such a small difference can count. So there are occasions when bowling an over for 9 runs is amazing, and there are occasions when bowling an over for 9 runs is terrible.
So Jared Kimber talks a lot about T20 stats and trying to look into them in context.
Yeah,
there's a very interesting sphere of discussion there. But I think when you come to first class and test matches, the batting average is a pretty solid indicator.
Pretty solid is fair enough in first class, because everybody has to bat and the game is ongoing. There's very rarely a time when the measure of success changes.
Exactly.
Usually when you're trying to save a game, that's about it.
Yeah, the thing with batting averages is just that sometimes you get really, really flat pitches, but
yeah, they do. Averages do reward more players. It's like certain types of players more than others. People who succeed on a flat pitch will generally be more rewarded by the average system than someone who succeeds on who is better suited to low scoring matches, for example.
And same for being a downhill skier in a strong team or being very good in your home conditions. If you have those attributes, your overall stats look better because if you are in a strong team, you're going to downhill ski a lot more and cash in. If you're good at home, you're going to play at home more often than not.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we don't need to discard stats. We just need more useful stats.
Yeah, and more context. Yeah. And just try to explain why you think that those stats are good, and then you can argue from.
Only way I play devil advocate to this is, especially for a guy like Crawley who's new, is that it's very hard to tell if that one good season or a run of 18 or 24 months was a purple patch or was legitimately a sign that he has stepped up his game. I think though in that situation, if you look at the eye test, Crawley does pass it. He's not got any obvious he's not a Sibley or Burns where you can look and go, hey, that's ugly. There's limitations there. He's going to have to work really hard mentally to overcome them. He's got a pretty good all-round game. He's got strokes all on the wicket. So just fundamentally, his batsmanship is of a good quality now. It's about can he take that mental shift to actually building beginning, showing some hunger. And the last 2 years probably showed that for him, the last season and a half. And I think this innings, I think he really made the point that once he's going to get in, he's going to be greedy. And I think that's something they talk about in the England dressing room a lot. Being greedy as a batsman, going out there and not being content with 100, looking for the 200. And I think he really tried to put that despite his inexperience, he's got the ability to score runs, and he's now building an appetite for it. So exciting.
Fair enough. Following on from England against Pakistan, there were some 2020s, which I didn't really pay attention to. I don't know about you guys, but I always think if there's some 2020 or one-day matches before a test series, I can get really sort of into it because it's kind of like, it's like a starter, isn't it? I'm looking forward to the main course. And after a test series, it kind of feels like no one really cares very much.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just not into pudding.
Yeah. Pakistan finally won a game in one of those T20s. That's all I know.
Yeah, they won a narrow game where there was, I think England needed 2 sixes to win off the last 2 balls. And Tom Curran hit a 6 off the second to last ball. And hang on. It's a bit World Cup-y in here. And then, he missed the last one.
Yeah, no, I didn't pay too much attention to them either. I was busy with other stuff right then.
We were going to watch, I think, we were going to commentate on the Australia-England 2020 that was occurring on Friday night. Unfortunately, our reliable source of television was undermined for some reason. But it was very exciting to listen to. In fact, it was more exciting to listen to than it was to actually see, because I thought that England had pulled off this incredible comeback where Australia were cruising one day, then a couple of wickets goes down. Morgan seizes the initiative, brings on his fastest 2 bowlers to burst through, and they do with searing pace, and then the 2 death bowlers close it out with skill and precision. That was the way it sounded on commentary. Then I watched the highlights, and yeah, they carked it. Australia just fell over.
That's about it.
It must be very weird though. Like, I think it was 2 weeks ago this series was announced. And I think most of the Australian players must have been thinking, okay, we're going to do Big Bash or something to start, and then they were called up. Maybe they knew a bit more than the rest of the world, but yeah, I still think it's a weird series to have, and I'm not sure it's really been necessary. I think England could have gone out there instead. But
they could have done. I think. I mean, we're probably going to have to get used to this kind of seat of your pants scheduling for a little while because everything has just been cast off the table like a chess game lost by a Yeti.
It's a bit more complicated than that right now because I think they were planning to, once they postpone the current World T20, they were going to play that and then play the next World T20 as initially planned. So you're going to have, if and when these things resume, the current plan is to play all these postponed tournaments back to back with the existing schedule that's already there. They're not actually scrapping a lot of things entirely.
No, and they have insisted.
I don't think it's going to be that way.
And they have insisted that the World Test Championship, which has obviously been thrown completely out of kilter by all this, is supposed to be going ahead.
Exactly. I was going to mention that because Netherlands were actually supposed to hold 6 ODIs this summer. Against, I think it was Pakistan and Sri Lanka, on our essentially club pitches, and those were cancelled right away, pretty much. And now the Netherlands are in a limbo because they can't play against the lower teams and they can't play against the higher teams.
So they're doing their own local T20 comp and stuff now for their best players, keep them busy. So apparently conditions in the Netherlands are fit to play cricket. It's just that the ICC is not going to stump up money to create a biosecure bubble to get Netherlands versus Pakistan games going through. And if the ICC doesn't put up money for that, Netherlands can't afford to do it themselves. Whereas England, with all the money in the world, is creating their own biosecure bubbles and getting their schedule done and getting their contractual agreements for broadcasters satisfied.
And
It's
it's
going to
not
be this weird situation
it's
later
not
on.
it's not just money though, is it? It's the infrastructure that's already there. The reason why England have managed to convince 3 sets of tourists to come over is that they've got things like hotels at these 2 grounds they're using.
They've got
Yeah.
enough space to give an entire ground to a team as a practice facility.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the ground here in Utrecht where I live, that's essentially a pavilion, and right next to it is a hockey club and an athletics field. And you can't use a hockey club and athletics field because they're doing full schedules as well. So it's going to be impossible to have something like a biosecure thing there, even if you could use, say, the town hotels, which are probably reasonably empty because people aren't doing business travel. So. And also, there was the fact that the government banned all international sports until the 1st of September. So the ICC made a reasonable decision based on that, this summer has to be, we can write off the Netherlands. But it'd be interesting to see if they get anything going this winter, and hopefully they will.
Yeah, and I think the big problem with India being so badly affected, it's going to really... once India is able to play cricket again, the BCCI is going to just pick whatever plans are currently on the table, tear them up, and do whatever fits them.
Yes.
So much unknown right.
What's the sort of thing you can do when you have all the controls? Get people to do what you say. I'm looking forward to that when my middle management position eventually blossoms into
leadership.
Into corporate leadership. Yeah, I was planning on never actually getting into that position, but I mean today has been, well, I feel like taking revenge on someone. Right. So speaking of India and BCCI, IPL has replaced the World 2020. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm disappointed by that. Partly because I have every reason to not worry about the IPL, but also because I don't know, I'm fond of the World 2020. I think it has some really memorable moments in it.
Yeah, the World T20 is great. Hong Kong beat Bangladesh in it. Never forget. It's a great tournament. But
and also the IPL's been every year, and World T20 was kind of suspended for a bit, and then it came back, and it was kind of. In 2020, they were also planning to do both men's and women's reasonably simultaneously, which I like.
Yeah.
So, now we're just going to get IPL and maybe one token girls match in between that nobody wants to play, and then it's just all these Super Kings and Knight Riders and whatnot that keep playing each other every 6 months. I have a feeling. So, I am not pro.
We are sort of guessing about it, aren't we? Because I mean, you were saying this earlier that the tournament's supposed to start in 2 weeks, and there are still no fixtures.
There's no fixtures yet. I just checked the website, and I remember announcing it by this weekend, but I don't know if he's announced it yet. There's no fixtures as of yet on the IPL website, and I haven't heard of it yet. Someone can correct us on the forums if it's been released. Not only that, but they found confirmed cases inside the Chennai Super King biosecure bubble already. Reina and Harbhajan have gone back for personal reasons. A couple of international players might not be flying out now. I think it was Kane Richardson who he got a contract, he got a lot of money in the draft, and he turned it down because he didn't feel it was safe to travel out, and he's staying back home with his family. I think it was Kane Richardson. So it's going to be an interesting IPL. And I do prefer the World T20, but let's remember that the only reason we have the IPL is because of the World T20. So, in some ways, the World T20 brought about its downfall on itself.
Like Zeus.
They blame Misbah. It's all Misbah's fault.
Like,
this is entirely
like Zeus
Misbah's
and Seating Kronos. We have the IPL devouring its own father. Right.
Indeed.
There is also the CPL, the Caribbean thing going on right now.
That is hilarious.
I kind of like it. That's.
What do you think? What do you think of the cardboard crowd?
No, that's true.
Okay, this is new to me. What?
There are cardboard crowds.
cardboard cutouts of people in the seats right behind the bowler's arm and the batsman, so that the bowler celebrates, he's celebrating to a cardboard cutout of crowd all cheering. It's hilarious. And the rest of the stands are empty. It's not the entire stadium. It's just those patches. So the camera pans out, you see emptiness, and then a little group of cardboard cutouts.
So hang on, this is for 2020 cricket.
Yes.
So there are sixes
CPL.
being hit into cardboard.
Yes.
Pretty much.
What does it count as a crowd catch if the ball goes directly through the hands of a cardboard cutout?
Do you want to give a
happen,
beer?
Hanne?
Cardboard.
Do you then award a lifetime supply of beer to the cardboard? These are the important questions that must be answered. At what point do you have to start ejecting cardboard cutout people from the stadium for bad behaviour? What would they have to do?
Probably blow away, I think, is the...
What about what happens when the ball's been hit into the crowd and the players have to go and find it? Do they have to stand there and socially distance from the cardboard people and wait for the cardboard people to throw the ball back?
Yeah, the social distancing isn't there, just to be clear.
And are they, if the players move into the crowd, so to speak, to fetch the ball, if the cardboard crowd are found to be obstructing the ball, what happens then?
Well, then they're beyond the boundary, so it doesn't matter, does it?
Okay, all right.
But yeah, I see you've already put your finger on the important issues here, Hal.
Yeah,
so
this is why I'm here.
I've only watched glimpses of the CPL. It's not a very convenient time to watch. And what do you think of the quality of cricket?
Has anybody criticised the cardboard people for not applauding people's centuries?
There are people. I mean, it's
fair,
not IPL level quality, but there are some decent knocks. There is some really weird stuff, like Jamaica has Andre Russell, but they keep sending him in at 7. Like when it comes in the 16th and 17th over. So that's really
very strange.
Yeah. So there's a lot of really strange stuff going on, is what I think we can summarize the CPL with. But I think the idea is to have a few of these players come over to the IPL, and the Afghanistanis have played. Rashid Khan has bowled a lot. Mohammad Nabi.
In the CPL.
Yeah.
Oh well, that's encouraging that we can actually have all this travel going on, because I would have thought it would just be domestic players, like it is in England.
No,
it's a lot of few associates.
Yeah, also some New Zealanders and I think a couple of Australians, but they're of the type that aren't even playing Big Bash. So, but yeah, it's encouraging, as you say, with that the travel has been possible. So that also leaves some hope for the IPL and other more established
and for a proper winter series. Both. There's been talk about the West Indies wanting England to tour in response to the series that they've played over here. Similarly, England going to Pakistan, which strikes me as less likely, but be nice.
Yeah, I mean, they have opened for tourism essentially, right? The Caribbean is open for tours. That's the sponsor of the West Indies team in England was Sandals. It was a tour group. So.
Yeah,
open.
Caribbean is probably the least hit region officially, at least. So
officially,
yeah.
So speaking of guys who may or may not play IPL, if I start googling MS Dhoni, the first 5 options on autocomplete are all some variant of "Will MS Dhoni play IPL 2020?"
It is the MS Dhoni Premier League at the moment.
I feel like it's MS Dhoni's tournament. At heart, isn't it? Isn't this like the the big disconnect between the Dhoni fans and people who are just sort of aware of him, are people who watch him in the IPL, right? Because he's just he's the main man of the format. I'm sure if you were to tally up the appearances, he would be right at the top.
Yeah, he's had the most wins, most successful captain. One of the best players in the format, and it's mainly because he just retired from playing for India.
Yeah,
you've got a big wave of nostalgia. People just want to watch him play one more time before he actually calls it quit for real. He's not going to be able to do it in India. I don't know if they're going to allow. I don't think they're going to allow fans in, even though in England they've started letting fans into county games. I don't know if the IPL will let fans in UAE. UAE situation is pretty stable right now. Most of it is opened up. I don't know if they let into the IPL.
I think we
So-
can all agree that what MS Dhoni achieved in the IPL is not adding to his reputation as a cricketer in any meaningful way. But does it actively detract?
No, it does add. Everything adds value. I don't.
Well, I think he means this season, right? How? Just because
He
I think
means
what he
IPL
had
doesn't matter.
over his career, that adds, I think. Yeah.
IPL is pretty legit for what it is. And it is first significant franchise T20 tournament.
Mhm.
So if you consider franchise T20 tournament to be competitive and serious, then Dhoni's achievements are real. I mean, there are people who think it's majority players out there is on vacation. And frankly, from what all of us have seen, team making and player selection and strategy that goes behind IPL games is quite often shocking and bizarre. But it's still the best cricketers in the world competing in a competitive format. It has you can never takes away from legacy. I think it does add some degree. Just how much it adds depends on you.
Sometimes it's the best cricketers.
Who was the best cricketers in T20? There's very few great T20 cricketers who are not in the IPL.
I mean, I'm going to have to check whether or not Ryan Sidebottom ever played IPL, but I'll take your word for it for now.
Has President ever played IPL?
You know what? I actually think he has done, which is why I didn't.
There you go. There you go.
Also, which Ryan Sidebottom? Because there are now two.
Oh yeah, what's up with
There's a
that?
second one?
There's an Australian Ryan Sidebottom.
Yeah.
Why? Did he rename himself?
No, he just. I think about 5 years later or something, they just. No, he's born 89, so he's 11 years.
Yeah.
But there was already an Arnie Sidebottom who played for Yorkshire, so.
He plays for Warwickshire.
Yeah, he plays for Warwickshire now, but he did play for Victoria for a while, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, Ryan Sidebottom is the new Imran Khan. MS Dhoni's not the only high-profile...
Next Prime Minister of Great Britain in 2030.
MS Dhoni's not the only high-profile player who retired this summer. There's Suresh Raina, who has retired from India probably at about the right time. It's post-World Cup.
I don't think he was really available for selection anyways.
Yeah. And the other one being Ian Bell. And it's nice that Raina and Bell are kind of there, because I feel like the series that cemented Bell as a proper Test player belatedly would be India and England 2011, when he just was immovable and phenomenal batting, and continued that form in an extremely patchy way for the next 2.5 years, but still was a world-class player. And that series, of course, was when we all decided Suresh Raina didn't play Tests. So there's a certain amount of symmetry there.
Yeah, Ian Bell's a good player. I mean, it's nice to see Ian Bell retire when Ollie Pope has stepped up, take the mantle of pretty batsmen batting down at 5 and 6.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of talk about Pope reminding people of Bell, but really it just shows you how long we've had since we've had a middle order batsman who plays orthodox cricket and looks good.
Exactly.
That's pretty much all that it is.
Yeah.
Middle order right-handed player who plays like it says to in the manual. That's pretty much it with those two.
Yes. Most batsmen nowadays follow the ODI manual, and they can have the heavy hands and things like that. Nice to have a throwback.
Yeah, I'm of the generation who basically whenever there was talk about England batsmen, there was always talk of dropping Ian Bell. And I could never understand that, because, okay, he didn't always make runs, but neither did everyone else. And if you look at the way the England team has been the last 3 or 4 seasons, then Ian Bell would have been the first name of the Ian Bell in reasonable form would have been the first name of the team sheet almost as a batsman.
Absolutely, and the end of his Test career was cut criminally short, in my opinion. I've ranted about this in previous airings, I'm fairly sure. But the circumstances of his dropping was that he didn't do very well in the 2014 to 15 summer, and then the 2015 Ashes.
Yeah.
And England wanted to play James Taylor, who had been on the fringes of the side for about 3 or 4 years. Fine. James Taylor did decently. He was a really good fielder. Then he immediately had to retire that winter because of the very unfortunate heart problem.
Yeah.
So now there's a big hole in the side. And they could recall Ian Bell. He's at this stage is about, 32, 33, and still probably one of the best batsmen in England. Certainly by far the most accomplished batsman in England, who isn't already in the team, with the exception of Jonathan Trott, who's obviously a whole other story. Anyway, I digress. They decide to pick for the James Vince and Alex Hales. The season after, they're picking Stoneman, Malan, and Westley. The season after that, they've got Keaton Jennings opening the batting, and who knows what in the middle order. I don't even remember anymore. But the point is that England had about 3 or 4 years where they were picking just whoever on earth they could find, while putting their fingers over their ears and pretending Ian Bell doesn't exist, just because he's in his 30s. And that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I kind of agree. But apparently that's the way they had thought, and they had a plan towards 2019, which I guess sort of worked. Even though that was one day internationals, but still. But yeah, I do think he was hard done by, and it's kind of sad to have him now retire after a bad season and sort of 4 years in county, when he could have had at least 2 or 3 decent test series to add to his record.
Yeah,
and he would probably have lifted his average even a touch higher. I think he ended with a test average of 42 and a bit,
which is a perfectly good average, right? A lot of people think of that as the mark of like a really average test batsman, and maybe it was 10 years ago, but since then we've discovered how hard it is in test match cricket to actually average well. And England's best batsman, Ben Stokes, averages about 38, so yeah.
Although he missed out on some of the hardest conditions, I think, so that could have been a problem.
True.
So certainly in the latter half of the 2010s, it's been harder than in the earlier half.
That's true. He did get away. He might have struggled a bit more if he in the more bowler-friendly era. Selectors tend to do that. They tend to drop a guy and sort of just close the case on him. I think it's one of those things where it's easier to move on than to trust again. When someone breaks your heart, it's easier just to move on. Lets you down once, twice, you decide you've had enough of him. Can't go through that heartbreak again of them letting you down once more.
That's also how he got into the side in the first place, because England discarded Graham Thorpe and wanted Ian Bell to play, and he played really badly in his first series, and I think that made a lot of impressions on people as well.
Well, in his first series that people remember, the reason why it was him and Peterson ahead of Thorpe, and Peterson was the debutant. Bell at that point, I think, averaged 1 million because he'd only played Bangladesh.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So his first real series, because Bangladesh in 2005 were really not worth talking about.
Well, they beat Australia.
That was that one game, wasn't there, with Ashraful? Yeah.
But even England beat Australia, so they clearly were on the slide. I really like that Bangladesh win over Australia, because I like to claim that Bangladesh softened them up for the Ashes to come. So really, that Ashes series is only thanks to Bangladesh.
Yeah. And in particular,
thanks to Mohammad Ashraful, yes,
who will never have who will always have that one day. And that segues...
No, he scored a brilliant century against Murley. So
look, I was about to segue. Can you let me segue?
I know, but that was use a better example next time, Jake.
Fine. Mohammad Ashraful will always have that one innings, and our 11 today, inspired mainly by Zach Crawley, whose one century at the time of writing is a 267. We've got some players that are principally known for their 100 or their one bowling performance. I found this much easier with batsmen than with bowlers. I don't know about you guys.
I've got one bowler.
Yeah, I've found mainly bowlers actually.
Okay, well that's a result. So I'll
have a wicketkeeper.
Okay, fair enough. We'll start with batsmen, but you guys will have to take over after a while. My 2 openers are David Lloyd, who I understand is predominantly known as a commentator for very good reason, but he was a player and he was a coach and he was all sorts of things. And at one point, he was drafted into the side because Jeff Boycott couldn't play and made 214 against India, never made any runs again.
And then just went back to county, I guess. Yeah.
He tells a story about going to speak for Jeffrey Boycott at a benefit dinner. David Lloyd tells this story, where he was introduced as Lancashire and England. David Lloyd, Lancashire and England. And David Lloyd says his speech at the benefit dinner for Boycott, sits back down again. And apparently Jeff Boycott only said one thing the entire evening to everybody who was there, and says, the only reason David Lloyd played for England is because I got injured. And then that's the only thing he said. My other
characteristic generosity from Boycott there.
I mean, yeah, he's a special case. I've also got Charles Bannerman, who has the oldest record in Test cricket I think it's the biggest percentage of runs scored by one player in an innings, 160 out of 260 or whatever he got. Pretty special in the first ever Test match for that to have lasted.
60 something percent still lasts to this very day.
I've got other opening candidates, if you want to hear them.
Yep.
Yeah, go for it.
So the first is Andy Gantillon.
Yes. Of course.
Who averaged 112 and then got dropped. And there's probably quite a bit of a story there. He played in 1948 for the West Indies and opened the batting. And then got sent back to his national team. And in those days, the selection in the West Indies, probably was... I mean, we can play now, but like in those days, they needed at least one and probably more white players. So, there's... and the white player was always a captain, so you needed to be friendly with him. So... Certain interesting things there. So he probably wouldn't have averaged 112, and his first class average is more reasonable at 34. But I still think they probably did something weird there.
Well, they could have made better use of him. But I mean, it's a symbol of how far we've come in a way, isn't it?
He claimed there was that reason he got dropped, but apparently the media at that time was saying he batted too slowly.
In 1948.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
That's what I tend to believe him that his reason is legit one.
I think so too.
I'm going to put him in instead of David Lloyd, despite the story, because Lloyd is mainly known as a commentator.
Yeah, and then the other one is Brendan Kurupu, who is
I got him
Sri Lankan player.
Okay. Well,
and he made 201 on Test debut against New Zealand, and that was probably a New Zealand side that was quite weak. Didn't really want to tour. Because Kurupu, he played about 50 ODIs and 6 more tests, and I think his highest score other than that was a 70. So, very weird career.
Strong work. So I think they can be a top 3. So Gantillon, Bannerman, and Kurupu. I'm then going to put Crawley at 4, even though he batted his innings at 3, because we can do that. It's fine. No one's going to moan about it.
I've got a very modern nomination for number 5.
I think I know who it is. Carry on.
Karun Nair.
Yeah, that's mine too.
Yeah.
Where is Karun Nair? He now 300 and gone. What's happening?
He's still playing domestic cricket. He's not doing that well.
So he got an IPL contract?
I think he did get an IPL contract. Let me take a look at that.
So
IPL.
I think it was the 4th test of the.
Oh yeah, 69. Great.
Wait. I think it was the 4th test of the 2016 series where Karun Nair scored a 100 against England. And the 4th test of a series in India is traditionally one where anything can happen because people are getting battered. I think I can actually look up our podcast title, and it was Weird Things Happen When You Stay in India. But yeah, I mean, yeah, full of promise. Young too, isn't he? There's plenty of time for him to come back. He could be known for...
No, he's persona non grata. He talked so much shit about not getting selected again. It's one of those things where he could be like an Ian Bell. He could have had a career, but just closed the door on him. I don't think he's ever coming back to India.
Wow, yeah, that's a shame. Usually talking endless amounts of crap about the selectors and the captaincy and the fact that you've been hard done to is only usually a measure of success if you're from Pakistan.
I wonder why they wouldn't pick him after he criticized them nonstop in India. It's just shocking. Criticize people and they don't like you anymore.
All right. You said you had a wicket keeper.
Oh, it's Brendan Kurupu. He's a wicket keeper.
Oh right. Well, that's easy then.
So you double that up.
Okay. I've got one more batsman for a number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that is Tip Foster.
Ah, yes.
And
I know him.
Yeah, and I'm including him because he made 287 on Test debut, still the highest score ever made on Test debut, pretty sure. Certainly
That's why I
the highest for an England player. Went to Australia after that, golden age of cricket, and is off on the way. It's not really that important cricket, is it? I'll just do something else with my life. Fair play to him. And I only include him
Sounds
to make Weeman 27 Bob happy.
I hope he listens up to here.
Yeah. So far our batting order is Ganthion, Bannerman, Karupu, Crawley, Nair, and Foster.
You have an all-rounder?
I do. I have a player who is known for usually one of three things, technically. He's known for hitting his only 100 at Lords.
Yeah, I got the
taking his only 5-4 in an incredible win at Adelaide, and predominantly otherwise known for being a bit crap.
Yeah, I really, really like Agarkar. Okay, I really highly rate him. He's one of my favorite cricketers growing up because he's such a fun player to watch. Nice bowling action, did really well in ODIs. But yeah, he's only really had two good performances in the 26 Test match career. One with the bat, one with the ball. Not much else.
I like the fact that he retired at the same time as Sachin Tendulkar and got sort of an amount of ironic praise that he probably wouldn't have done if he played on for another season.
It's his Reina moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it hard
he was a pretty great cricketer.
I found it hard to find any pace bowlers, but one of my two spinners can bat at 8, so I'll nominate Mark Craig.
Yeah.
Who, even after taking 7 for against Pakistan in the UAE, still averaged about 40 with the ball, and then his average only went up from there. The other thing that I mainly know Mark Craig for is that it was claimed that a certain member of Cricket Web Forums had more first-class wickets than him.
Yeah.
In my opinion, probably erroneously.
He's only got 151, so it's not that many.
Is he still playing first-class cricket?
I think he retired, didn't he? Yeah,
That
his
would
last game was in 2018 October.
Fair enough. But still enough to make a mark on this list.
Although I've also got a candidate for number 8 and all-rounder.
Go for it.
Mike Proctor. Hero of drafts everywhere, and he only has 1 5-fer because South Africa just stopped playing again for reasons I've touched on earlier in the 11s. And he took 6 for 73 in his last test against Australia in 1970, and after that South Africa were banned.
Yeah, so, I feel like this is controversial.
Never scored a 50.
I feel like this is controversial because to a certain generation, Mike Proctor is the guy who took 1 million wickets for Gloucestershire.
Yeah.
But to the generation of people who are probably listening to this podcast, he's the guy who gets picked in draft threads. So I'm gonna, I think that's perfectly fair, and I'm gonna bat him behind Agarkar to make those people angry.
Go for it.
Go for it. Yeah, he's got a test highest of 48. So like just off proven test performances, Mike Proctor clearly is a number 9.
Fair enough.
Okay. I've got a fast bowler.
Please, I'm missing fast bowlers.
As well. Bob Massey.
Oh, yeah. That makes perfect sense.
Yep.
16 wickets on debut, nothing else after that.
Excellent.
31 wickets in a 6-match career. More than half of them in his first game.
I think it was Brumby who coined the term Massey to describe an extreme effort at the beginning of one's career, but followed by little afterwards. Such as Wells massied with Citizen Kane, and by the end of his career, he was doing Carlsberg adverts. Thanks to Brumby for that one. So yeah, I've put him down as my number 11 then, and the one remaining slot for me is Jason Frazier.
Ooh, how come?
Because he played 2 Test matches, and in one of them he took 12 for 300, and in the other one was dropped as a result of not being able to bowl South Africa out in Perth.
Very, very good criterion to judge your spinner on there. Bowling South Africa out in Perth.
I mean, that's ultimately why he was seen as not good enough, because South Africa chased so much in the 4th innings, but nobody could get them out. But that's more or less it, as far as I can tell, for Jason Frazier. He was also, I quite like the fact that his 12 for was taken at an economy rate of 5.
Yeah, that 12 was kind of rubbish, to be quite honest. He just got wickets because guys like Sehwag decided it was fun to try and slug him over long on over and over again. And
But India didn't even make that many runs. They made 400 in the first innings, which I grant you is a good score, but not always the case in India. And they only made about 250 in the second innings.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they would have made less if not for Kretzer.
I still contend that he fits the definition of known for a particular 5-wicket haul.
Yeah, fair enough.
Any other nominations?
No, we got 11.
All right, fair enough then. Our 11, to read it out and one final time then, it's Ganthiam, Bannerman, Kuripu, Crawley, Nair, Foster, Agaka, Proctor, Craig, Fraser, and Massey.
Bowling attack there.
Excellent team.
Some nice stories and some weird stories.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully one of them, in Zach Crawley, will go on to actually not deserve his place on there. I don't often make wrong predictions, as you know. But I will predict that he will make another Test century.
Oh my God! If he doesn't, Jake, if you just done him in with that, if you just cursed him for life.
Well, then Jake will deserve it.
I mean, it'll be one. We'll add it to the one of many things that I deserve as a result of my inconsiderable lack of knowledge. And feeling as though I can still do this. But I'm very grateful to have been able to get another one of these out. Thank you very much for joining me. I think we're just about done for the day. So it's going to be goodbye from me. It's going to be goodbye from yourself, Hanne. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And goodbye from Nitesh.
See you. Bye-bye.
Next time, boys and girls.